Hello and welcome to A Guide to Every Deck in EDH. Today we're looking at Wylie Duke, one of the new commanders from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. So Wylie Duke is a green and white 3-drop 4/2 Vigilance. Whenever he becomes tapped, you gain 1 life and draw a card. So obviously what you want to do is find the cheapest ways possible of tapping Wylie Duke and then untapping Wylie Duke. So he can't tap himself because he has Vigilance, so attacking doesn't cause him to tap. But otherwise you're going to want the cheapest ways of retapping him, untapping him, etc. So let's just go through those one at a time. So first up, we've got Earthcraft, which is an enchantment that says tap an untapped creature you control, untap target basic land. Instill Energy, which gives the enchanted creature haste and can untap it once per turn for 0 mana. We've got Bramble Snap, which is a creature that allows you to tap an untapped creature you control to give it +1. Obviously, Bramble Snap himself is not that good, but he is a green creature and is thus fetchable off of any creature tutors and Green Sun Zenith specifically. So if you're missing a way to tap Wylie Duke, this is a way to do it by fetching a creature. You've also got Vehicles, because crewing allows you to tap Wylie Duke, so the best one of these is possibly Clown Car, since you can play Clown Car for 0, or more mana later on if you want to get more value out of it. But primarily the Vehicles here are not going to be played because they're so great, but mostly just because they allow you to tap Wylie Duke, although they do have some utility. So Flywheel Racer can tap for 1 mana as long as it's a creature. Do note that if you do crew Flywheel Racer the turn you play it, it becomes a creature and is therefore summoning 6, so you do have to wait a turn before you can tap it for mana. Smuggler's Copter, which you can just use to draw and discard a card with. And then finally, Unlicensed Hearse, which is just a way to exile stuff from graveyards. Again, none of these vehicles are really that great, but are just in here to crew Wylie Duke. There were other vehicles that I could have played in here. The biggest one that's missing is probably Reckoner Bankbuster, so if testing proves that that card is actually good, I may add it back here. I may cut something like Flywheel Racer, for example, but just a few artifact vehicles that you can use to crew via Wylie Duke. Then most of the other tap effects are going to be things that allow Wylie Duke to add mana. So Cryptolith Rite, Karametra's Favor, which is an enchantment that gives Wylie Duke the ability to tap to add mana of any color, and when it enters, draws a card. Similarly, Multani's Harmony is tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, enchanted creature gets this ability. Utopia Vow basically does the same thing. You've got Relic of Legends, which allows you to tap and untap legendary creature you control to add a mana. Paradise Mantle, same deal. Springleaf Drum is a one-off. And then Catilda, which is a creature that gives your humans tap, add 1 mana of any of this creature's colors. So the reason that we're going to want primarily ways of having Wylie Duke generate mana is because of our untappers. So our untappers fall into 2 different categories. We've got one-off effects that allow us to untap Wylie Duke just 1 time, and then we've got ways that are going to untap Wylie Duke every time some condition is met. So the one-offs are things like Burst of Energy, Emerald Charm, Light the Way, Mobilize, Nature's Chosen, and Vitalize. Now, cards like Mobilize and Vitalize, which untap all of your creatures, have secondary uses in terms of if you've got other creatures with tap abilities, like Monodorks, for example, this allows you to untap all of those. In the case of cards like Emerald Charm and Burst of Energy, these can untap any permanent, not just Wylie Duke. So if you've got a permanent like the One Ring or Gaia's Cradle, for example, this can untap those. Also, there's Legolas Quick Reflexes, which is split second, untap target creature until end of turn it gains Hexproof Reach, and whenever this creature becomes tapped, it deals damage equal to its power to up to 1 target creature. So if you've got another way to tap Wylie Duke afterwards, it allows you to burn creatures. It also is, of course, a spell that's not counterable, that protects your Wylie Duke on top of doing everything else. So amongst all of the 1 mana untap effects, Legolas Quick Reflexes is probably the best one. Then you've got these cards that are going to allow you to untap Wylie Duke once per whatever condition is met. So Drum Bellower untaps all your creatures during each other player's untap step. Of course, Seedborn Muse untaps all your permanents during each other player's untap step. Quest for Renewal is whenever a creature you control becomes tapped, you get a quest counter. And then if you've got 4 plus quest counters, you untap all creatures you control during each other player's untap step. And then Sting the Glinting Dagger is an equipment that equips for 2, and it says, among various other abilities, at the beginning of each combat, untap equipped creature. And that's each combat, not just each of your combats. So these basically, per turn cycle, allow you to untap Wylie Duke. And then, of course, if you've got any of the repeatable tappers, you can keep untapping and tapping it over and over. So this essentially allows you to, if Wylie Duke is unmolested, allow you to draw 3 to 4 cards per turn cycle. Now, obviously, there are a ton of cards that for just a single mana allow you to untap a creature, and most of them are combat tricks that are basically draft chaff that you would expect to just see in some limited environment. And originally, when I was building the deck, I did opt to play as many of those as possible, and it is potentially a possibility that you could have some sort of like green-white storm deck where you just tap and untap Wylie Duke over and over and over. My problem with that particular strategy was that there is a limit to them. I forget exactly how many cards this wound up being before I cut most of them, but I think it was around 30 at the maximum. And I'm not sure that even with that many cards, since you're only drawing one card per Wylie Duke tap, I'm just not sure whether that is actually able to storm through your whole deck unless you had a radically different build of the deck. The second problem is that, specifically in green and white, there is no way, unlike these repeatable tap effects like crewing or bramble snap or giving your guy the ability to tap for mana, there is no equivalent card in the untap category. So there is no aura or enchantment or any card that allows you to just untap your creature over and over and over at no cost. That might have been an option if you're in blue, but of course Wylie Duke is not in blue, so we do not have that ability, and therefore the storm route I felt like was a little dubious. But if you want to go for it, there are of course a ton of untap effects that you can find even in just green and white. And if you are interested in something like that, I have EDH packages. So this is all of like the best white untapping effects. So as you can see here, there's a lot more that I opted not to play. Not all of these will apply, like Rally of Wings only applies to, only gives the pump to your flyers, but you know, you might not necessarily want all of these, but these are all of the basically great white cards that allow you to untap. And then here's all the green cards that allow you to untap as well. So some big omissions were things like Quirion Ranger, Wirewood Symbiote. And then there were some additional colorless cards that also may have let you untap that I opted not to play. But overall, this is the basic strategy that I settled on for Wylie Duke. So now that you know how we're tapping and untapping Wylie Duke over and over, what specifically are we doing to win the game? Well, we've got some tutors in some basic stuff: Enlightened, Green Sun, Ranger Captain, Worldly Tutor. We've got a little bit of stacks in white with Aven Mind Sensor, Doorkeeper Thrall, and Drannith Magistrate, although because this deck wants to be casting a lot of untap and tap effects, anti-storm cards like Rule of Law effects are not really what we want to be looking at. A little bit of removal. Obviously, we're going to want ramp. Specifically with Earthcraft being in our deck, we're going to want ways of finding basic lands. So land fetching ramp like Farseek, Nature's Lore, and 3 Visits are going to be more valuable than they normally would be. Obviously, the deck doesn't work if Wylie Duke doesn't make it, so we need ways of making sure that Wylie Duke doesn't get countered or killed. So in the anti-counter category, we've got cards like Allosaurus Shepherd, Cavern of Souls, Veil of Summer, and Grand Abolisher. And in the category of doesn't get killed, Giver of Runes, Mother of Runes, Skrelv, Sylvan Safekeeper. Our lands are pretty straightforward, with obviously some of the standouts being Gaia's Cradle. If you're on a budget and you can't afford Gaia's Cradle, it's fine, you don't need it. A little bit of fast mana to make sure that Wylie Duke can get into play while still having mana up in order to counter things. And Reprieve as a counter spell, and Concordant Crossroads because we're going to want haste for something that's going to come up in a bit. A little bit more card draw, although again, with our commander being its own card draw engine in the command zone, we don't need that much of it. And then finally, we've got Squirrel Nest. So with Earthcraft and Squirrel Nest in play, this is an infinite combo. So you enchant a basic land with Squirrel Nest. You then tap that land to make a 1/1 squirrel. You then use the 1/1 squirrel that's in play to use Earthcraft to untap the basic land that in Squirrel Nest is enchanted to. And you repeat over and over and over, creating infinite squirrels. Now, this is infinite tapped squirrels, so you do not get to win immediately, and passing the turn may be a problem. So you can either do this at the end of turn of the opponent who's about to pass to you, or if you've got the cards or ways to dig for the cards, again, we do have ways of untapping all of our creatures. So if you can dig your way to Mobilize or Vitalize, you can then untap all of your squirrel tokens, and then with Concordant Crossroads, give all of your squirrels haste and attack all of your opponents to death immediately. Now, that is a bit convoluted and does take multiple cards, but if you've got Wylie Duke and a draw engine going, you can potentially just draw your way all the way into those cards and then win from there. Now, for anybody who has a distaste of infinite combos, there is unfortunately not really a good way of winning with Wylie Duke if you're not doing this, unless you're just playing generically big cards like Craterhoof Behemoth, Avenger of Zendikar, etc. But this is the cleanest way of doing it, with Earthcraft also doubling as a way to tap Wylie Duke and get mana. But otherwise, yep, that is going to be Wylie Duke in EDH.